Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Woke Bros. Of course, I'm your co-host, Big Wos, aka Wazi Lambre, and Nando Vila, super producer, Hollywood big shot that he is, couldn't be with us today. He's out gallivanting Sundance Film Festival. I'm sure he's giving all of his top 10 lists. He's telling people to follow his letterbox. I'm sure he's being a Hollywood mogul that he is. But today we got another woke bro up in here, my brother Ben Burgis. What's up, Ben?
Hey, man, always really happy to be back. It is funny. I think my invitation to Sundance must have gotten lost in the mail.
They must have sent it to your old address. They forgot you moved to LA. That's what happened. Oh, man. Anyway, on today's show, man, I just wanted to have a general conversation about what's in the news. I mean, aside from the Republican primary, Donald Trump is kicking their fucking asses up and down the United States of America. He's got 20 million indictments. It doesn't matter. He's just killing everyone. He's beating Biden in the polls. It's hilarious. And there's not, whatever. Didn't want to talk about that, but it's hard for me to think that Biden isn't losing support because of his handling of what's happening in the Middle East. And it seems to just get worse and worse by the day. Last week, they fired their first airstrikes on the Houthis in Yemen. They said it's because of the blockade in the Red Sea. Of course, Ben, they're blockading the Red Sea because the Israeli government is bombing the shit out of Gaza indiscriminately. So instead of being like, hey, our partners in Israel, maybe we should take a different tact or strategy or try something different. Instead of going in that direction, they say, no, let's make more war. More killing, more bombing by bombing the Houthis. And again, Joe Biden just did a press briefing today, and he was asked at this press briefing, essentially the exact question, Ben.
Yeah.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working? This is not okay. So that's the question posed to President Commander-in-Chief Joe Biden. And I'm not making this quote up. This is a real quote. Joe Biden replied, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes. This is Joe Biden's answer to, are the airstrikes in Yemen working? Are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes. Ben, what the fuck?
We were talking a little bit before we started recording. I was saying it's really amazing to me that combination of words could come out of his mouth, and he didn't have a moment afterwards of being like, hold on, what did I just say? Right? Like, does that make sense? This is clearly the idea that a few more bombs in Yemen are going to stop the Houthi blockade in the Red Sea is bizarre because, I know people's memories are short. It's the old joke about how God invented war to make Americans learn geography. But Yemen has been continuously bombed for a very long time, right?
Yes.
This is
great friends, the Saudis, have been bombing the ever-living shit out of them for years. Going back to the Obama administration. So this is 3 presidents now that they've been bombing the shit out of Yemen, ostensibly to, thwart the Houthis, and it hasn't worked. They've only become stronger since these bombings have started.
Yeah, exactly. At this point, the Houthis are, they're not diplomatically recognized by anybody really, although the Saudis have been negotiating with them because they have no choice. But the Houthis are the government of Yemen. They control the vast majority of territory in that country. It's not like the Saudis didn't have the biggest and the best bombs, courtesy of us, right? For all those years of bombing and really the siege that happened in Yemen during all those years, right? Was like something medieval. I mean, it was really extreme stuff. This is if that didn't do it, right? The idea that compared to all that, right, this is nothing. So the idea that this is going to stop it, just even take morality out of it, take, world politics out of it, take the, what I would certainly call the ethnic cleansing in Gaza out of it, right? Take all that out of it, just like on its own terms, just as a practical issue. The idea that, oh, well, we have this problem that they're blockading the Red Sea, and we need that for global trade. They're actually calling this Operation Prosperity Guardian, which is something else.
Jeez.
But okay, so here's our solution to free it up, right? We're gonna drop a few more bombs on the Houthis. That doesn't make any sense, but we've already tested this. Like, when there was a ceasefire,
right? If it was a new idea that we could just recognize, like, that's probably not going to work, but it hasn't been tested. So you say, I'll give the listeners example, because a lot of our listeners are sports fans, right? So when the Clippers made the trade for James Harden, it was obvious that Russell Westbrook needed to go to the bench, but the coach was like, Ty Lue was like, you know what? All of my veterans, all of my stars are going to want Russ to start. I know it's not going to work. Anybody with half a brain knows it's not going to work with him starting, but let's try it just so we can show the stars and the important players on the team that we tried it. They can watch it not work and we can move on with our lives. This ain't that. This is something that's been proven not to work, and we're doing it anyway.
But you know what was proven to work? When there was a ceasefire in Gaza, then the Houthis stopped, right? Because they've been saying all along, right? We're doing this because of Gaza, because of this, campaign of bombing and then incursions, ground troops into Gaza, that, like, really just because, as you said, right, it could be people watching who aren't necessarily like obsessive news and politics, people. So people might not quite have a sense of how bad it's been, but there are 2.3 million people who live in Gaza, and 1.9 million of them have been displaced from their homes since October, right? That's how bad it's been. And so under circumstances like that, it's not really that surprising that one of your neighbors, who is already pretty hostile to you, right, would intervene, right, and take action to try to stop what you're doing, right? That's what the Houthi government in Yemen has done, imposing this naval blockade. And you can throw around words like pirate all you want, although I think if you're talking about a government that is it's not a non-state actor, like you're talking about the people who are governing this country, who are going in and saying, okay, we're gonna stop. Like, I mean, was the US doing piracy when it did the blockade on Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis? I don't know, but but
we know that there's a double standard for the US, obviously.
Yeah, and I think it's like really important too, because another dimension of all this is that if anybody cares about this, from the perspective of the law, right, of the American Constitution, this is illegal, right? There are a bunch of people in Congress who've pointed this out, people in the squad certainly, but also people like Ro Khanna, right? One or two Republicans like Mike Lee, but mostly these progressive Democrats have been pointing this out, and this is, the excuses, because you can't say, like, for years and years and years, American presidents, Bush, Obama, Trump, like, whatever they wanted to do, right? They'd say, oh, this is the 2001 authorization for the use of military force, right? That's like the all-purpose hall pass to do whatever you want to do in the Middle East. But at this point, they've kind of given up on that, because it so obviously has absolutely nothing to do with what that was about, right? Which was about the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and all of that. So you have to say, well, we could find some, act of Congress about piracy somewhere, but, like, again, that doesn't really seem to apply. And, what people are sort of left to resort to is saying, well, this is, okay, because the president is the commander in chief of the army, without Congress declaring war, he's still allowed to repel attacks. But the only attacks are because the U.S. sent ships to a place where there was already a war going on, and so yeah, if you do that, right, like there are going to be attacks. But if it's that easy, right, to get around like the requirement that you need Congress to go to war, then the requirement is just meaningless, because that's the easiest. Okay, well, all right, let's send some ships and to aid one of the sides in a war. They inevitably take some enemy fire, and then we're acting in self-defense. It's just kind of silly, right? And like, and I guess the last thing I'd say about this is, if you can, like, even if you put all that aside, right, like you don't care what it says in the Constitution, you don't care, you don't care about the Palestinians who, like, if you read the kind of reports that are happening in Gaza of they like little kids having to have amputations with no anesthetic because some of the hospitals are bombed, the electricity is all out, all this stuff. If you don't care about any of that, I guess my last pitch would be, okay, but do you care about the U.S. getting involved in another big war in the Middle East? Because we've done that before and it never seems to go well.
Yeah, we've gotten our asses kicked twice. In the sense, yes, we deposed Saddam Hussein and got him killed, but Iraq has been a freaking quagmire since. ISIS came through in its stead. It's worse than what it was before. Like, even the most staunchest supporters of the Iraqi invasion will tell you today, on January 18th of 2024, the situation in Iraq is worse than it was before we invaded. Like, we've made it worse by invading. Of course, Afghanistan, it was about 6 hours before the Taliban rolled in and toppled the regime that we had been propping up for 20 years. Like, literally 6 hours. Like, that shit needs to, like, that doesn't get said enough. And when these people are talking about their strategies over there, like, the Taliban came back, took over Afghanistan hours after we left.
Yeah, well, I mean, in fact, it's worse than that, because it was hours after we'd started to leave, but like, we literally couldn't get all the way to the airport. Right?
Before they were already back. 20 years, literally trillions spent on this project. And we couldn't even get out the airport before the Taliban had already taken it back. That war was started because, yes, we needed to find, allegedly, and kill Saddam Hussein. Then we wanted to make a new government. Rumsfeld and them had these grand designs with Iraq and Afghanistan. We're going to make this new, all private, this capitalist, fucking Milton Friedman wet dream in the Middle East is going to be great. Didn't work. The nation building didn't work. We're going to drive out the Taliban because they fostered the terrorists and they hid bin Laden and all of this. And the Taliban's going to be gone. 20 years. These motherfuckers didn't let us leave the airport. Okay. So the idea that, let's get into another protracted war in the Middle East for nothing. To do nothing, to change nothing, to do nothing but kill people.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess, and really, like, just to emphasize this point, we know what would work here. When there was a ceasefire for a few days, right, the attacks in the Red Sea stopped. That's it, right? Like, that's like, we could do a long-term version, and the problem would be solved. And I mean, like, the real thing here is also that, okay, the Palestinians, I mean, people will, I think there's a lot of revisionist history in a lot of different directions on this, but this is, this has been since 1967. These people have been living under Israeli military occupation in the West Bank and Gaza in different forms. And it's, but there's never been a point where they're like, okay, we're just going to let you form your own independent state, right? That's a thing that's never happened. And a lot of people I've seen, like Trump apologists have their own version of revisionist history there, where it's like, oh, everything was peaceful and great, when he.
I heard that on October 9th, when people were like, essentially, what's the name? Hamas. They did this because there's not a strong man in the White House. There's nobody who they think is willing to nuclear bomb them into oblivion. Like this idea that like because Trump is perceived as crazy and hot-headed, that they were kept at bay. I've heard that argument made, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are people who will bring up like the Abraham Accords, which was this thing that, Trump made a big deal of doing, which was essentially about like this diplomatic coming together of Israel and Saudi Arabia,
but Saudis and the Emiratis and all of these, essentially Muslim Arab nations who traditionally through the years, at least rhetorically, if not, if in no other way, honestly, providing absolutely no other support whatsoever for the Palestinian people, but at least rhetorically, the regimes would pay lip service to the idea that they care about what's happening to the Palestinians, meaning their subjugation needs to end. Again, like you could be as pro-Israel as you want. I don't begrudge anybody their pro-Jewish state, ethno-nationalist state, whatever. You can do that if you want. But like, what are these people? So should these people just live in a stateless existence? No self-determination ever for the rest of these people's existence? Like, is that like, why do they have to be the only people on planet Earth subjected to this? Like, why?
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's not just, to really emphasize when you say stateless, it's not just they don't have their own independent state. It's, they're certainly not, allowed, citizenship in Israel. Right. So it's like,
they have no agency anywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, this has been, in 1967, when Israel took the West Bank and Gaza, I mean, if you're a Palestinian who was born the day after that war ended, you would be eligible for senior citizen discounts today, right? Like that's been how long that's been going on, and so, and in fact, the whole point of the Abraham Accords, what Trump was doing was to freeze out the Palestinians.
Stop talking about that. We're done with that. That's a settled issue. Let's get to the business of being buddies because we all hate Iran. Let's get to that. Exactly. Okay. Exactly, all the Palestinian shit, it's in the past. Fuck that. We all hate Iran. We can all agree on that. Now let's shake hands and make this official because let's be real, unofficially, there is no beef between the Israelis and the Saudis and hasn't been for decades.
That's the ridiculous thing about it. People will talk about this.
The enemies, Israel's surrounded by enemies. It's like, no, they're not.
Yeah. Trump ended that war that was happening between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Like that just, come on. It's silly, right?
It's ridiculous.
But what it does is it, like, diplomatically, it takes away the only card, or really, half a card, right, that the Palestinians ever had, which is that, like, at least the Arab states pretended to care. They had, at least you couldn't have totally normal relations with those states as long as, the Israel-Palestine issue hadn't been settled. And it took even that away, right? And then that process of normalization between those states and Israel continued under Biden. And really, that's why October 7th happened when it did.
A lot of people will say that, that is why, because, for people to understand, and we might have mentioned this on the show before, like, it feels like, today, it would seem that the Saudi royal family rules that country with an iron fist and their power is intractable. You could say the same thing about the Emiratis. You could say the same thing about the people in Qatar, the ruling regime in Qatar. It would seem that way. However, that stability is based on the acquiescence of the people. And so, like, they erode their credibility with their own people if they come out and be like, we love Israel for the shit they're doing to the Palestinians. They can't do that. Like I get it. It seems like they're intractable now, but that doesn't always have to be the case. Okay, like that power is fragile. The stability is fragile as far as, you know, the power that they rule their people with. And, you know, it doesn't always have to be that the case there. And so, like, when people act like it doesn't matter what happens to the Palestinians, no, it's not true.
Yeah, I mean, look, lots of monarchies, dictatorships that have existed for a lot longer than those ones have fallen, right? I mean, like, there's
toppled,
none of this stuff is permanent. And yeah, population certainly cares, which is why they had to, you know, pretend to a certain extent to care. And then, like, you know, being enticed to kind of give up on caring, I think that, you know, led to a situation where things were going to explode, as well as a lot of what was going on, you know, within Israel, Palestine. So people, there's this ridiculous like talking point. It's like, oh well, you know, there was a ceasefire on October 7th, so it's like, well, not really, right? Like, there was if you look
at they're killing these dudes all the time. Like, the IDF is killing these cats all. It's a ceasefire or not. It's you know, because again, they're our friend. They get to operate within the double standard of that friends of the US get to operate. And so, yeah, it's like when they kill people during the ceasefire, it's like, no, this is just regular. We're just killing terrorists. Like, killing terrorists during the ceasefire, you know, this doesn't count. You know, anybody who we deem to be terrorists, it doesn't count.
And that's even Gaza. I mean, at the same time, like on the West Bank,
these frothing at the mouth settlers, forget about it, armed to the teeth, just going insane. Like, we know what's happening, but I wanted to pivot a little bit, Ben, because I think Joe Biden is suffering from a crisis of confidence within the American people. Nobody thinks he's leading. Like, let's just say if you're a Biden flack and you were on the woke bros right now, and I said, give me some proof that y'all are leading that you guys play any meaningful leadership role in the events that are unfolding over there. Like, where is it? Where is it?
Yeah, I mean, what Biden always says. In fact, like, there's that there's that AME church where he was disrupted by hecklers, you know, who are
the people, you know, these peace people. How could they do it at a black church, Ben? You know, the black church is sacred now. You can't demonstrate for the deaths. Do it at Jerry Falwell's church now. Come on, the black church is sacred, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
talk about human shields. That's what Biden was doing.
No, exactly. Also, like, look, I don't, you know, I wasn't raised in Christianity, so I might not be an expert here, but like, I'm pretty sure that promoted peace in the Christian religion, you know, there's might not be a totally inappropriate context, but yeah. So in that, right, like, if you watch that video where Biden, you know, like, Biden's being heckled, you know, what he even tries to say in the moment is like, well, you know, I've been working quietly, you know, behind the scenes, you know, and
God. So that's the leadership. It's happening quietly. Nobody can see it.
Yeah, exactly, right?
It's invisible.
You just have to take their word for it. And it's like, well, what's the, you know, I mean, they say people like it, like, if you go back and look at like the whole course of the last 3 months and see like all this alleged pressure on Israel, they have, you know, like, what have they gotten for it, right? There was a ceasefire for like a few days. There was people make a big deal about like letting in humanitarian aid and like how, you know, US pressure might help make that happen. But if you look at the actual amount of aid and you compare it to a situation where 1.9 million out of 2.3 million people have been displaced from their homes. Certainly no food is being produced in Gaza right now, my God, right? You know, and you know, and you say, oh, well, hey, we let in like 100 aid trucks for those 1.9 million people. It's a joke, right? So and like, especially now, right, what, like, it seems like for at least a week or so, what all the Biden people have been saying is, oh, well, the Israelis have said that they're transitioning to lower intensity, form of warfare, which we think is going to be good for reducing civilian casualties, letting in more humanitarian aid. But even that, they say, like, if you read the fine print on that, they say, like, at the end of the month, right? So it's like, okay, so all it takes is, well, in a few weeks, in a few weeks
they're gonna chill, essentially.
Yeah, it's like, well, okay, first of all, so you're saying we can have a few more weeks of horror until that happens, and two, I don't believe you, right? Like, why should I believe that they're actually going to do that? Like, they haven't given me any reason to think that. I mean, all this.
No, in fact, Netanyahu's going out and saying, no, we need to control that whole area. It needs to be all controlled by Israel from the river to the sea.
Yeah, exactly. He actually used the line, right?
He used it, which I thought I thought that was a racist term to ever utter, Ben. Apparently not.
Apparently not. No, apparently it's totally fine to say that.
Again, totally fine for you to say that. And also because, they always do this shit about, Hamas wants to genocide Israel and every single Jew that's ever lived, blah, 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 right? Meanwhile, these dudes are shooting pea shooters. The Israelis actually have the capability of doing it with the weaponry that has been provided to them by the West and their other collaborators. They have the will, and they're saying they're going to do it.
Yes, all the time. Like if you
they have the act, like, it's important for people to know that, like, Hamas doesn't own, fighter jets and all of this crazy weapon. They don't have that. They couldn't do that to Israel even if they wanted to. It's not a reality. It's not a possibility. Israel, on the other hand, absolutely does, could, and is saying that they will.
Yeah, I mean,
that's cool. Apparently,
if you look at South Africa's indictment of Israel at the International Court of Justice, a huge part of it is just quotes from Israeli officials where they're saying things like, there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. Long term, when this is all over, we should try to relocate most of them somewhere else. Like all of this stuff like that, right? This is. There are a million statements where
or what did they say? Encouraged migration, I think, was one of the euphemisms that they use, which I just think was crazy. I want to get you out of here on this idea, Ben, because when I see Biden talking about are the airstrikes stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Yeah, and by the way, at the beginning of all this, you were talking about Biden losing support, and I know the sort of thing that you're supposed to say if you're like a world-weary kind of Dem operative who's, who knows better and doesn't get excited about this shit. You're supposed to say, oh, yeah, well, people are mad about it now, but nobody's going to remember that, in, whatever, 10 months, when the election is. And it's like, okay, but for that theory to be work, it has to be over sometime between now and then. Like, when's it going to be over? And if you're doing stuff like bombing Yemen, then that doesn't point towards it being over. It points towards a wider war that could very well still be going on in November.
Of course the war is going to still be going on. Who are we fucking kidding? Like, stop it. They're not going to be done by November. Are you kidding me? Anyway, the reason why I asked is because we know if you do any reading, of the people who are really close to this, we know, like, the national security establishment sort of operates as a hammer. If you come to them with what should we be doing in the Middle East, they're going to find a nail.
Yeah,
right. Like, they're gonna. So we know you can't go to, like, Biden can't go to his national security establishment of advisors and analysts and all of that and say, "Yo, what's the, like?" I know there's the bomb the shit out of the Houthis vision, but what's another vision that we could have for how we're operating? He's only going to get, maybe we could bomb Iran. Like, the options are going to be very limited to that frame. So who the fuck is Biden talking to, if anybody? Where does he get the other frame from?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good question because, ideally, right, from diplomats to the State Department, whatever. But, I've seen very little evidence that that's, happening.
I heard the State Department is getting shut out.
Yeah.
I heard he's told the State Department to fuck off. I'm a Middle East expert. I don't need your opinions on this.
Yeah, right. And he's been like, and this is the other thing about Biden, that he's been consistently terrible on stuff like this forever. Like, this is not, like anybody who's, and this is one of the things that makes me pretty skeptical about, quietly behind the scenes where you can't see, where you have to take his word for it, right? That there's some kind of like meaningful pressure being applied, which, by the way, meaningful pressure would be like, we're going to stop supporting you if you do this, right?
Yeah,
like that's,
of course.
because if it's not that, anything else is just a request, right? It's just feedback, right? Like it's, and that's, Netanyahu's going to take that, like seriously, maybe to the point that like he doesn't laugh in your face, but like that's as seriously as he's going to take it. But yeah, one of the reasons I don't believe that he's applied that kind of pressure is that Biden has been super duper pro-Israel his entire career. If you go back, I actually wrote an article about Jacobin about this last year. If you go back when 1981, right, when Israel invaded Lebanon and Menachem Begin was visiting the United States, he met with a bunch of people, a bunch of American politicians in DC, including Senator Biden, and the conversation was written up in an Israeli newspaper in Hebrew. It was never translated to the U.S. because nobody really gives a shit. It's the senator from Delaware. Who cares what he says, right? But but like the stuff that Biden was saying to Begin is really shocking. He was like, yeah, of course, right? There's like terrorism from Lebanon. Of course you had to do all that. If there's terrorism from Canada, we'd bomb all the cities in Canada, kill everybody. And so this is the stuff he was saying in 1981. I see no evidence since then that he's had any meaningful
that
change
he's involved on the issue.
No, not at all. In fact, back during the Obama administration, there was a time when Vice President Biden was visiting Israel, and I think it was Netanyahu then too, right? Netanyahu was doing stuff that the Obama administration didn't want them to do, building more settlements, stuff like that, and it was seen as this big embarrassment that he was doing all that like while the vice president was visiting, and the Secretary of State, who's somebody I'm not a fan of, Hillary Clinton, but she had but she put out this statement being like, no, you got to stop it, or this is really going to be a problem, right? And Vice President Biden apparently went to Netanyahu and said, don't worry about that. I'll smooth all this over, right? Like this is under the Obama administration, right? So there's no reason to think that there's that
Biden's got like a Herzl tattoo somewhere on his body.
Right? He's the most he is the most fanatically pro-Israel Irish guy that Delaware ever produced.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible situation because it's not like Trump is going to be better if he beats him, which as of this moment it looks very possible that he's going to do. It was because when Trump was president, he did absolutely everything the Israelis wanted him to do. He finally moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which they've been pushing for like decades. They again, Abraham Accords are all about freezing out the Palestinians. There was basically nothing that Trump wouldn't do for them. But it's also going to be really hard, right? Like, so I'm from Michigan, and that's a state that Trump won in 2016 and Biden won in 2020. Pretty important swing state, and it also has the biggest Arab American population in the U.S. And I've got to say, like, as much as I actually do think that, that like, if possible on this, Trump would actually be even slightly worse. It's going to be a really hard sell to go to those people and say, yeah, I know Biden has been helping.
I know he's completely shit the bed, but it can be worse.
Yeah, right. So be like, okay, yeah, I know that, like, Biden,
yeah, but guess what? Trump's not asking for my support.
Biden killed a bunch of your cousins in the Middle East, but like Trump would probably be even worse. You should still vote for Biden. I mean, I don't know. Good luck with that.
Yeah, that's the Democratic Party. Good luck with that. Ben, thank you for coming on. Tell the people where they can find all of your stellar work, my brother.
Thank you so much. So I write for Jacobin Magazine. That's jacobin.com.
Sure.
And I host a YouTube show and podcast called Give Them an Argument.
I was on that the other day. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you were on that very recently. Have been on many times. And we'll be on soon again, I'm sure.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks again.
All right, y'all. We will see you guys next week. Shouts to producer John Gervais on the ones and threes, making sure that the trains run on time. Become a Patreon at patreon.com/countthedings. That helps us put out this amazing content for you guys. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.